a lot of the focus on sustainable new sources of protein, from algae to cell-cultured meat, has been on foods and beverages that we feed humans. But what about what we feed our pets?
So I'm Rich Kelleman. I'm with Bond Pets, based out of Boulder, Colorado, and we're working with biotechnology to make pet food from animal protein like chicken, turkey, and fish without the animal. So essentially using classic fermentation techniques to harvest proteins that are identical in their composition to what you would get if you harvested an animal from farm and field. Initially, we were looking at cell culture to grow and harvest our meat proteins, but once we started to dive into that process and look at the different options, we realized that we were solving a fundamentally different problem compared to what companies are working on the human food side. And what I mean by that is for some of the leading companies in the space, they're trying to fully recapitulate that meat experience, right? Get that exact taste, texture, smell precise so that we as people can embrace it. For dogs and cats, it's more about nutrition, right? It's making sure that we produce and harvest a protein that is nutritionally comparable or superior to its conventional counterpart, but we have more leeway when it comes to the form factor and the structure itself.
I feel like dogs and cats maybe don't have the same expectations to.
Yeah, it's not like they're not able to necessarily like eat that piece of kibble or that treat or a dehydrated or freeze-dried product and say, wait a minute, this isn't chicken. So there is that flexibility, and knowing that almost every application in that final recipe will be processed in some capacity.
Okay, so just let's go back to the production process.
Sure.
So you're tasting a yeast or a microbe. Are you then genetically engineering it in some way that it secretes proteins, in a big fermentation tank, and then you kind of filtering out the yeast or the microbe at the end, or?
Yeah, we're using a process that's very similar to the way that enzymes have been produced for cheese manufacture, or bacterial strains for probiotic supplements, or even the heme protein in the Impossible Burger.
Sure.
It's the same fundamental process that they've taken to harvest those ingredients we're using to produce our animal proteins. Once we do have a commercial product, the protein that we're creating will be less structured. It will likely be in like a baby food consistency or a paste. Mm-hmm. That could be then gently dried into a concentrated protein and then mixed with other ingredients into a final recipe.
Yeah, and what kind of protein is it in terms of its amino acid profile? Is it a complete protein, and what kind of proteins do pets need?
So dogs need 10 essential amino acids. So things that they can't produce just internally by themselves, they need that from food and nutrition. So we have 10 essential amino acids that we need to make sure that we nail for them, and then cats have 11, and that additional one is taurine. So as we grow and harvest our proteins, we're going to ensure that we have that suite of essential amino acids that they need to rely on this as a core component of their nutrition. We're growing and harvesting these meats in a much more sustainable way, and using less land, water, and energy to produce the equivalent kilogram of protein. That's something that we can lean in on and educate the public about, the fact that we don't have to slaughter animals to produce the same proteins. I think that for one audience is a huge selling point, and higher safety also of these meats compared to what you get on the slaughterhouse floor is also something that we can kind of lean in. So long story short, I think there's a lot of different things that we could spotlight to get people excited about what makes this better and different than what's available today. So initially we are going to launch with our own brand. And the reason that we're doing that is because we want to, it's a fairly new concept. There are some great companies that are also exploring different ways to protein in the pet food space. But the idea of feeding your dogs and cats foods that are primarily based on fermented proteins is new. So we want to be a force in helping educate the public about the beauty of this.